I'm really excited to be able to share this presentation with you today about the wellness benefits that birds and nature, particularly birds and feeding birds, brings to all of us. So starting our new year off healthier by feeding birds. So we all are probably watching this today or coming together because we love birds, right? And probably love feeding birds. Perhaps you are somebody that sells bird feeding products, or somebody that is, just watching birds right outside your own windows and doors. But the question is there something more in it for us beyond just the enjoyment? Well, I certainly think so, because I personally credit the practice of watching birds of helping to save my life. And I will talk a little bit more about why I can make that statement as we go on. But thousands of years ago, Hippocrates said, we need birds and nature, stating that nature itself is the best physician. So I have to ask you, how many of you have had your physician write you a prescription for watching birds or to be out in nature? Well, if you haven't yet, I'm optimistic and I'll say not yet. I think that's just around the corner, and I'll explain a little bit more about why. Why are birds and our personal well-being a perfect pairing? Well, the science is there now. And much of the science revolves around nature, right? And specifically the powerful effects of being in nature for our overall wellness. Perhaps even yesterday, there was a study that came out and that CNN was highlighting about the benefits of experiencing nature for periods of time each day. And I'm specifically talking to you about birds. And why birds? Well, birds offer these gateways into deeper experiences with nature. We just need to be open to seeking them out. And the fact is that it starts right outside our own windows and doors. I think a lot of you on this call can appreciate how enormously important the practice of watching birds come into a feeder, or perhaps a bird bath, or visiting your native plants or other plants in your yard can be. For a lot of people during the pandemic, it really cut the edge off of the loneliness that we felt when we couldn't have our friends over for parties, or also holidays, right? We couldn't have our families and friends. I mean, in some cases, this is still an issue. But what we could do during that time, during the lockdowns, is we could invite birds in closer. And by watching them and making that connection when they came to visit us, it felt like they were accepting our RSVP of an invitation to come spend time with us, but also cut down on that loneliness. And I have to say that during the pandemic, so many people who owned wild bird feeding stores, whether that be Wild Birds Unlimited or smaller independent stores, anybody who connected people to the birds right outside their doors by providing resources to do so. These people were unsung heroes in our communities because they were helping people's overall wellness. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, think about it. During that time, so many people benefited from the joys of being able to bring birds in closer to them by putting up bird feeders. And I think a lot of you probably know that during the pandemic, a lot of people had the opportunity to slow down and start to notice birds. And they would notice birds coming in to the feeders. They would notice the sound of birds. And thanks to the people who helped us by staying open late. I know a lot of the wild bird feeding stores had curbside delivery during this time and worked overtime. Next time you go pay them a visit, give them a big thanks for what they did for you and your community, because truly they were doing something for people's well-being and got a lot of us through the pandemic. So thank you all. And it's enjoying the quality of these simple experiences of awe that we have just with the birds in our own backyard. And studies show that awe, the experience of awe, being wowed by something, having a magical moment, does a lot for our own well-being. It helps us break some negative thinking patterns, but also allows us to think about something other than our own problems, our own worries, and empowers us to want to go out and seek more and help others. Birds are amazing because they are everywhere. I feel that they're equitable. They're in all human habitats. In habitats in urban environments, we share them with birds like rock pigeons, house sparrows, starlings, and many others. Everywhere we go, we can find birds, wherever you are and wherever you go. By seeking out birds and by taking in each moment, we are rewarded with benefits to our mind, body, and soul. And this is ornithotherapy. So more and more studies are showing that being around birds and being around biodiverse areas have enormous effects of positive benefits on our well-being. So this study right here is by the University of Exeter, along with the British Trust for Ornithology and the University of Queensland in Australia. And it suggests that people living in areas with more birds are less likely to suffer from depression, anxiety, and stress. And the best part of all, you don't have to know anything about birds in order to benefit. So you don't have to know what the bird's name is. You just have to be open to watching and noticing and listening to the sounds of the birds in your area. So what is going on? Why is this a therapeutic practice? Why are birds so good for us? One of the theories is called the attention restoration theory by a couple of doctors called Kaplan and Kaplan. And their theory suggests that when we allow birds and nature to give us this little mental break, right? By stepping outside and tuning into something other than what we're hyper-focused on indoors. We all have those long to-do lists. We're constantly tasking, constantly trying to keep up with our busy lives. And sometimes it wears us down. But if we take the time to go outside and just sit and just listen and just watch, we are redirecting our emotional energy. It's sort of like changing a mental channel. And we can do this, we can practice this just by looking outside our window and watching the birds around us, like this finch eruption. So this is my backyard a couple of years ago, but it's hard not to be distracted and allow ourselves, to have this opportunity, a little commercial break in the middle of our day, just to look out the window like I was doing here and watching all these pine siskins and a couple of goldfinch in there. And who can't be completely amazed and wowed by this experience, right? Having an experience of awe, but also making that connection while recharging our batteries. The studies show that when we redirect our mental energy, this activates different areas of our brain, gives our tasking part of our brain a little bit of a break, it's stepping off that treadmill, and it's good for us. Studies also show it makes us more productive and creative. And one of the best parts about that too is that nature and birds are without any judgment and are available for all people to experience and enjoy. Like I was saying before, birds are in every human habitat. And just by seeking them out, by going out and allowing ourselves to be ourselves, is a positive thing. So when I say that nature is without any judgment, what I mean by that is that you could be having a really bad day, right? You could be having, a day where you're really feeling crappy, or you're really feeling like you've had enough. And, people, when they're really frustrated and stressed out, say, I need to get some air. Why? Because innately our brains are attuned to the fact that being out in nature is good for us. It does something for us to help us clear our mind. When we start to watch birds, birds aren't judging us for how we look. They're not judging us for what our belief system is, or maybe the argument we just had with somebody. Birds just allow us to be who we are. And they're out there for all people, again, to experience and enjoy. And you could be having, one of your a really difficult time, and go out and things could change for you. This is my son, Henry, here, and we had a really magical experience together a couple of years ago. Henry was going through a depression. He was changing his major. He's in a very rigorous chemical engineering major in college, and decided that he wanted to shift into something else where he could use his creative skills a bit. And he was feeling down about all the work he had put into his current studies. And I didn't know what to do as his mom to make him feel better. One of these days, I decided I'd seen some owls. I was birding in Philadelphia it's actually our urban wildlife refuge here in Philly. And I took Henry out and I said, let's just go check out these owls that I saw this morning. And he was a little reluctant, said, Mom, I don't really feel up to it. And I promised him, Henry, I'll take you back home if, you're not having a good time or you just don't want to be out there anymore. But please just come along, hoping that something would happen to change his mental channel. And as we were walking along, we saw one of the owls, and he was like, oh, that was kind of cool. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll go to see the next owl. This one you can get a better look at, you'll get a better view. As we were walking along the trail, I looked over talking to Henry, and I spotted this bird. Now, this is a northern saw-whet owl. And this is one bird that I had walked by multiple times earlier in the day. And I said, Henry, look, there's one right here. And it was, probably about 7 or 8 feet off the ground. I put my spotting scope on it. That's the view you see with my iPhone through my spotting scope. And there's the owl, the little owl peering back at us. And as Henry watched through the spotting scope, I saw a change in him. His body language started to shift. It's like the stress started melting away from his shoulders. He wasn't holding them tight anymore. They started to relax. For the first time, I saw a smile break out on his face. And this was amazing because I hadn't seen my kid smile in weeks. But what was really magical was when a couple of ladies walked down the trail towards us, and we invited them to look through the spotting scope to see the saw-whet owl because they'd never seen an owl before. And one of the ladies, as she was looking through, started to cry because she was experiencing awe, because she had never seen anything so adorable. She had never seen a little owl before in her life. And for her, it was a magical moment. But what was also magical was witnessing somebody experience this feeling of awe, and the way in which we can use birds to make these connections, to change our mindset, to feel better about the world around us, and to feel more connected. Now, I won't say that this was the antidote to everything that Henry was going through, but certainly it helped break those negative thinking loops that we get ourselves into, helped to change his mental channel. And that's one of the benefits when we're watching birds, is that they help capture our attention and provide us that connection to the bigger world around us. We start to feel a little bit smaller in that world, and not in a bad way, but in a way in which it shows us our relationship to the natural world and how we all fit together with the birds in nature. And this is not a new concept. For thousands of years, people have been practicing this practice of using nature as part of wellness. And this word ornithotherapy is not mine or my co-authors. I could first find it referenced in the British Journal of Medicine in 1979, when a doctor in London stated that as a tranquilizer, bird watching may be as effective as any drug, but cheaper and safer than many. he had prescribed bird watching to some of his patients and noticed the powerful effects, and without all those side effects that accompany medications. So think about this: bird watching as a tranquilizer. Can you think of a time when you looked outside your window, perhaps at your feeders, and noticed feeling better? That perhaps the birds were bringing you joy, excitement. Perhaps you saw a bird that you'd never seen before, or one you were hoping to see. The fact is that we all need ornithotherapy. And if we allow birds and nature to slow us down, we're self-medicating with doses of ornithotherapy. And that's what we do every time we look out our window and we start to watch and experience the joy that birds to bring us. So what's going on here? Well, we can find a lot of refuge through birds and nature. And when we step outside and we're in green spaces, studies show that chemical reactions start to occur. Our biochemistry actively changes. And cortisol, that stress hormone that we all have coursing through our bodies, well, when we're stressed out, sick, or whatever, that flips into overdrive and starts to erode away at our wellness, at our well-being, and how we feel, even how we look. Actually, studies show that when our cortisol levels are elevated, our metabolism doesn't work as well. So if you're thinking about getting more fit for the new year, throw in some bird watching, some ornithotherapy. Watch those birds out your window, because truly, when we start to be engaged in nature, have that nature immersion, after 20 minutes, our cortisol levels start to lower, which is pretty amazing, right? And how hard is it to give 20 minutes? I say this is the year 2023. So a quest for the new year could be to spend 23 minutes a day watching birds outside your window, or watching birds, wherever that might be, wherever life takes you, because this in itself will have measurable effects. So again, after 20 minutes, your cortisol will start to lower. Now, who doesn't want to be more healthier, right? And we know that wild birds benefits our minds. And these are the studies that show that immersing in nature can help us decrease anxiety, lower our stress and cortisol, just like I was saying, reduce negative thinking patterns, improve our memory, cognition, and our concentration. I really think that all of our corporate centers in the US should have these ornithotherapy breaks. There should be bird feeders right outside in green spaces for all the corporate centers, and people should be encouraged with benches and places to sit and watch, because studies show that this increases productivity, it increases creativity, and also, again, this memory, this mind games. I mean, they improve concentration, all of this stuff that we can experience and benefit as people who are in the workforce. The return of the investment on putting out bird feeders and allowing employees to take time to watch would be amazing, because the workers would be healthier and happier and more productive overall. And we know it has profound effects in healing. But birds are truly heart healthy. And we know studies show that by connecting to nature, we can lower our heart rate by that time spent watching and observing. And it also decreases our adrenaline and stress responses. Studies also show that it increases the production of blood cells that promote good health of our vascular system. So forget about that oatmeal box that has the big red heart and says it's heart healthy. Yeah, that's heart healthy, but birds are even heart healthier. Now, remember I was asking you if your doctor had prescribed for you to get out and watch birds or be out in nature yet? Well, here's the thing. This is happening across the globe. So in the United Kingdom, physicians are working within the national healthcare system, are working with different providers in order to go out and have prescriptive nature experience. And this is part of a drug-free wellness plan. So I'm going to highlight the Wildfowl Wetlands Trust, the WWT in the UK. They are doing something right now, working with teams of healthcare providers, and they have a blue prescribing project. If you want to learn more, seek out wwt.org. But also the Royal Society for the Protection of the Birds, RSVP, is also supporting this concept and supporting physicians in writing prescriptions for people to get out and watch birds, to be in nature, to access the benefits for overall health. Because again, we know that there are measurable effects that are positive and without any side effects, right? So we're not talking about any side effects except for perhaps joy and all of the good things. So, there's another one that I wanted to mention. In Canada, doctors have started prescribing in the last year national park passes. So there's about 15% of buy-in from Canadian doctors that are actively prescribing national park passes. So this was in concert with the national park system in Canada. So, and that number is increasing. More and more physicians are starting to recognize and realize the potential here. And again, this is something simple that we all can do. So I don't think it'll be very long until doctors start telling their patients to start watching birds, to put up some bird feeders. In fact, I was talking to my physician about this, and she did mention that this is something that she's going to start talking to her patients about. She was already talking to them about using all and finding all to help us feel better, because again, all these studies surrounding that experience. One of the ways to experience all, again, is to connect with nature. And here it is, so easy, right outside our own windows and doors. There are so many studies about the effects of bird song, just listening to birds. And you don't have to know anything about what bird is singing, just enjoy that beautiful music. We know that when we listen to music that we like, studies show that dopamine, the chemical messenger that facilitates pleasure, is released. So it does make sense that when we listen to bird song that we like, that same thing happens. Listen to the sound of the wood thrush and see what you think. I don't know about you, but every time I listen to that song in particular, I just start to feel some of the stress melt away. I just start to feel better. It fills my heart with joy. And this makes sense. My response, my reaction, perhaps that was yours as well, or you can relate to a time when you felt this way. But Cal Poly put out a study in 2020 that suggests that avian sounds heard during hikes boosted people's sense of well-being. And this was a study that measured the responses people had by walking on a trail. And one trail had piped in bird song and the other didn't. It was just, vacant of bird song. So they had these little speakers hidden for group A who listened to the bird song, not knowing. And when they did a survey after the two groups went hiking or walking on the trail, they realized that there was a marked uptick in the sense of well-being, feelings of feeling good, feeling happy, feeling an overall sense of contentment. There was a marked uptick in group A, and that could directly be correlated to birdsong. And just recently, in the past couple of months, Max Planck Institute in Europe, this one came out of, I think, Berlin, suggests that birdsong reduces anxiety and irrational thoughts, right? So listening to birdsong reduces those thoughts. And King's College in London came out with another segment to a similar study that suggests that seeing or hearing birds is associated with an improvement of well-being that can last up to 8 hours. 8 hours. So just by listening or watching birds, we can benefit from this. This is amazing. Well, this is not something surprising to me, and probably not to you either if you're watching this, because you love birds as well, and there's a reason for it. But truly, there's psychological benefits that we get from watching birds. And when we can bring them in closer by offering bird feeders, by offering bird baths, things like this, we benefit just as much as the birds do. This is a reciprocal relationship. That feeling that we get when we listen to birdsong, making us feel good. Well, it's no wonder that the studies show that we start to feel better or we have reduced anxiety. And that's because when birds are singing, they feel safe. In other words, this little Carolina wren that was in my yard, he wouldn't be singing his heart out like he was in this picture if the Cooper's hawk was nearby, right? You know, he's going to be freaking out if the predator is nearby. And our minds recognize that when birds are singing, they feel safe. And it helps us because we are animals too. And whether we know anything at all about birds, our minds are in tune. And it creates a more relaxed but alert state of mind. And this is really fantastic. And it kind of echoes what Andy Goldsworthy, the British artist, said, that we often forget that we are nature. Nature is not something separate from us. So when we say that we've lost our connection to nature, we've lost our connection to ourselves. So just bringing the birds in closer allows us to experience something. And understanding the benefits that this practice of watching birds out the window or ornithotherapy, this is actually a conservation initiative. It's just wrapped in a different package. So when we're out there feeding birds and promoting the wellness effects of watching birds, we're actually promoting bird conservation, habitat conservation. We're encouraging people to think about, pay attention, and make connections with the world around them. And this is a good thing. There was a study that was released by Cox and Gaston, in 2016. And these two researchers come out of the University of Exeter in the United Kingdom. And they suggest here that feeding birds may provide an important tool for engaging people with nature to the benefit of both people and conservation. Again, a conservation initiative. And they also reported in 2015 that the pleasure that a person receives from watching an individual bird at a feeder is dependent not only on the species, but also on the diversity of the birds at the feeders. So this study suggests that the more feeders you have that can attract different types of birds, the better you will recoup the benefits from. So for example, don't just have a hummingbird feeder here, perhaps have a hummingbird feeder, a suet feeder, finch feeders, Niger seed, platform feeder, have all the feeders, right? I mean, the more feeders, the better, because again, studies suggest that the diversity that you're pulling in through your bird feeding habits not only is great for the birds, but also is for your overall well-being as well. Pretty exciting stuff. And people, again, this is Cox and Gaston, people who fed birds regularly felt more relaxed and connected to nature when they watched their garden birds or their yard birds at their feeders. I'm guessing that a lot of you can probably relate to this as well, right? I'm kind of probably preaching to the choir. And I was mentioning earlier about how for me, this practice of watching birds, for me, I really truly believe it helped save my life. And for me, it was the strongest medicine I had in truly a fight for my life. When I was a young mom, I was diagnosed out of the blue with an aggressive form of breast cancer, and it kind of hit me by surprise. Our family was already going through a really difficult time. My husband was a naval reservist and had been activated. This was shortly after September 11th. And he was away in the Middle East. And I ended up taking my kids sledding and fracturing two vertebrae, compression fractures in my spine. And then 6 weeks later was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was like, oh my goodness, like the world just came crumbling down around us. And I have to say, even though it was incredibly challenging for my family, my kids especially, I felt so lucky because the birds were there for me. They were my companion along this journey. And I had no idea what a huge role they would play in my survival. One of the more difficult things about going through this for me was losing my hair as a young mom. And my older son had expressed to me how difficult this was going to be for him, like to see me bald. And, it was a sign that mommy was sick and none of the other mommies were bald, right? So when I lost my hair, it kind of all came out at once. And I really didn't know what to do with it. I mean, do you throw it away? That seems really weird and wasteful. But why would you ever keep it, right? And so it all felt weird. And I just ended up, setting it aside and not wanting to think of it. Didn't have to make a decision then. Put it aside. And then I ended up thinking and realizing that, if you put your hair out for birds in spring, gosh, maybe some birds would take it. I had heard that if you take birds, if you take dog hair, or, I think even I've seen this in wild bird center type stores where you can buy yarn or fuzz or stuff like that. And if you set that out for birds in the springtime when they're building their nests, they might take some of it and use it in their nest. So I thought, well, gosh, all this wasted hair, let me try an experiment. So I ended up thinking that probably the best thing I could do was take half of that hair and I shoved it into a suet cage I had. And I put it right outside my kitchen window. I had a shepherd's hook with the bird feeders. And I thought, well, gosh, I was in a brace from the neck down and had been through so many surgeries for the breast cancer and was going through rigorous chemo. But maybe I'd get to my kitchen window once a day or so. And so one of those days, I had this like suet cage with hair, and I don't know what the heck my neighbors were thinking about what that looked like, what that was. But one day I looked out my window and there was a tufted titmouse. And that tufted titmouse was sitting on that suet cage. And if you know the tufted titmouse or titmice in general, you probably know that they're super curious, right? And so this little bird was hopping all over that cage, started to tug and pull at my hair, and started to pull out strands of my wasted hair and carried it away. And in that moment, everything changed for me. I didn't feel the loss I had felt about losing my hair because now my hair had been repurposed for new life. And for me, that was everything. And because the birds helped save my life and were there for me during my journey through this experience in my life for me and for my kids, my family, I am dedicating my life to doing everything for them to help them survive. Because the birds in nature are truly there for us when we need them. We just have to access and look for them and invite them in closer. And we can practice a more mindful style of birding just by being aware of the moment. So for me, during that really difficult time when I was going through cancer treatment and frankly, in other difficult times in my life, I turned to this style of birding called mindful birding, where I focus just on the present moment. I'm not worried about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow when I'm watching birds. I allow myself to slow down and be in the moment. And I'm intentional in this practice. I set time aside for myself. Perhaps it's that 23 minutes a day that we're going to take where you set this time aside for yourself and let yourself just focus on the birds. Be in the moment with the birds, not thinking about your to-do list, not worrying about what comes next. Just give yourself permission to observe And be without judgment. Let things happen as they will. Maybe you don't have any birds visiting your feeder. And that leads to wonder, that leads to curiosity. What's going on? Is there a Cooper's hawk in my yard? Is something else happening in my yard? Becoming more attuned to the natural world. And let the birds feed your curiosity as you feed the birds. Don't worry so much about the ID. You know, sometimes we get so wrapped up in what is a bird? Just enjoy the bird. You know, they're constantly changing the name of birds anyway, right? So just enjoying the bird for who the bird is and learning about it and making that connection. And when we get out and start taking a walk, we can harness those benefits. Just like this walk I took in California a couple years ago. Just by watching the birds and allowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission to slow down and pay attention, it helps us to stay afloat. And we all have those moments when life gets challenging and when we need that extra lift. And birds can be that buoyancy for us. Watching birds at our feeder can be like our life jackets, like I was explaining it was for me. And for some people, it can be therapeutic in healing of the heart. So this is a lady called Liz Pettit, who's going to share her story about how birds help transform her healing of her heart.
Birding has been a passion of mine for over a decade now, as is photography. It wasn't until a recent tragedy in my life that I found myself in, I guess you could say, a different relationship with birds. 3 years ago, my 23-year-old son died very unexpectedly. Grieving his loss was a very dark path for some time, and as I slowly found the light again, I discovered something unexpected. Birds were revealing themselves to me in a way that ultimately played a part in healing of my heart. I now see birds, and aside from the mindfulness and beauty and joy that they bring, they also sometimes bring an amazing gift in the form of a reminder, or you could say a sign from my son. Just a couple weekends ago, early on a Sunday morning, I headed out to a nearby lake where I bird on occasion, and I came upon 1,000 or so Canada geese. And shortly thereafter, I spotted what looked like 2 white geese and immediately pulled my binoculars to my eyes. It was a pair of almost angelic-looking Canada geese, both of very diffused white and light gray plumage. And as I took these stunning beauties in, I knew right away these were a gift or a sign. See, the anniversary of my son's death, which has been heavy on my heart and mind this month, was coming up in another week. So yet again, one of many signs I've experienced where birds gave me the gift of peace and comfort, the spirit of my son, and the continued healing of my heart.
And even watching the most common birds can teach us something and be therapeutic. The more we look at birds, the more we understand them and ourselves, and the healthier and happier we'll be. Because watching birds brings us so much joy, but there's so much more in it for us, mind, body, and spirit. So my question to all of you is, have birds impacted your life? If they have, spread the word. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today here, and just wanted to make mention, if you're interested in the book Ornitherapy, I'd be happy to share a discounted copy. Just email me at ornitherapy@gmail.com. I think Emily has the information somewhere, and just let me know. So thank you so much to the WBFI and to the Finch Research Network and Crossley Books. So thank you.